Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we are going to talk about getting started in Warhammer 40,000, because I reckon right about now is one of the, if not the best time to actually get into the hobby. Now, there will be people out there who will sit there and go, no, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's so expensive. It's more expensive than it's ever been. In some ways, yes, the game has increased in price significantly. Certain units are, I think, very over-costed in terms of actual money. But there are also deals in place that kind of, well, are really good in value in a way that a lot of stuff hasn't been for a long time in terms of the hobby. The start collecting boxes, for instance, are, I think, absolutely fantastic value. I mean, if you and a friend went out, you bought a different start collecting box each, you've got the foundations of a decent army. Not only that, but you also have an introductory experience where you can use those forces against each other. It might not be 100% equivalent in terms of power rating or points, but it's still an entryway into the wider hobby as a whole. You've also got different choices in terms of box games. You've got the Dark Imperium set, which you could easily go halves on and have two not insignificant forces out of that box. There's, if you can find them, there's also older box sets that are still floating around if you wanted to pick and choose. People regularly get those box sets. They break them down into individual units and then they sell them on eBay. And quite often they'll be pretty cheap compared to buying the full unit from Games Workshop or a local retailer who has a maybe 10 to 20% discount. For instance, when the Dark Imperium box first came out, the Primaris intercessors that came out of that box, I regularly saw pop up on eBay in the UK at least for around 15 to 20 quid, which is not bad at all, especially when you consider that 10 Primaris Marines now are £35 from Games Workshop. The downsides, I think, to starting 40k now, which actually we should probably get those out of the way, is firstly, there is an amount of choice that previously was not available. There is a huge range of models to choose from. There's a large array of forces to choose from, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. Even if you're just looking at the start collecting boxes, there are options galore. Really, the best way to go about deciding what you want is to read up a little bit on the factions that jump out the most to you. You might see something and go, I really like the way that looks. Would I like the way that plays? There are countless resources online for finding out, what faction does what, how do Dark Eldar play, how do Eldar play, how do Space Marines play, how do they compare to each other. There are a significant number of videos and written pieces that people have done explaining all of that, and they will do a better job of it than I will. So if you're looking at something and you go, I like the look of that, would I like the way it plays? You'll easily be able to find that information out. Another way to do it is to look at battle reports. I'll do a few links in the description to some decent battle report channels. A good way to get a feel for the way the army plays is to watch someone else play it. You can get a really good idea as to whether that kind of tactic suits you just from watching someone else play. If that is a little bit overwhelming, again, it doesn't really matter, because there are other ways to find out, what specifically you want from an army. When you've decided, the start collecting boxes are such an incredibly good value way of getting in. The value of those compared to the value of the individual models, it varies a little bit, but there's not a single box in the group that isn't, significantly cheaper than buying the stuff separately. I think the Guard one is relatively not that great when it comes to the value of the combined things. The Adeptus Mechanicus one, I seem to remember, is really good, but just an example, because Space Marines are a very popular first choice for a first army. Dreadnought is around 28 quid. In fact, I think it is 28 quid. A tactical squad is 25 quid, and the captain, I believe, is £15. That's well over £50 worth of stuff, well over 60, maybe even £70 worth of stuff. My mental arithmetic is not great. But yeah, it would be close to 70 quid. and it's going for 50. Now, if you bought that from a online retailer or a local game store that's got a discount, you are already doing pretty damn well. And there are several of those boxes. If you're thinking in terms of, you know, what is the army that I could get the most out of with the least amount of effort or the least amount of faffing around, things like the start collecting boxes are again really good for that, because there are some forces in there that you could pick up 3 of them and have a pretty good force. You know, something that is actually kind of respectable. Some of them require more work. For instance, the Space Marine Start Collecting box, I do like it because it has some classic, iconic Space Marine stuff in there. I mean, the Tactical Squad and the Dreadnought are 100. You think Space Marines, that's what you think. They require a little more work to get a full army out of, but they're still a good foundation, and there's enough in there that, you know, you could reasonably start collecting an army, and a friend could start collecting an army at the same time. You could easily play them off against each other and see how you like them. Now, obviously, you can't return them if you do that, but it does give you a good idea as a basis for what you want to do. And I think probably the start collecting boxes are one of my favourite things that Games Workshop have done for quite some time. You know, there are genuine savings to be made, and it is an easy to understand way of getting into the hobby. Now, if you wanted to take a slightly different route, there are other things that you can do. Like the box sets, like the Dark Imperium set, is, I think, fantastic. Genuinely fantastic value. I mean, I'm just trying to remember what the actual contents are in terms of the Primaris stuff, which is on the shelf behind me. You've got the three Inceptors, you've got 2 Lieutenants, you've got the Captain in Gravis armour, you've got a 5-man squad of Hellblasters. Is it 2 5-man squads of Intercessors as well? I think it's 2 5-man squads. That is not an insignificant force for how much the Dark Imperium box costs. And you also get the Death Guard force in there as well. I mean, there's like 20 Pox Walkers, there's the Foul Blight, Foul Blight Spawn, I can't remember what his stupid name is. You've got 7 Plague Marines in there, Lord of Contagion, the again, I've totally forgotten the name of it, the Blight Drone, that's it. Fetid Bloat Drone, sorry. You've got a decent amount of models, you've got 2 decent armies in there. You could easily split that with someone. If you can find someone else who is interested, if you can find someone else who wants to get into the hobby, you can absolutely split that box between the 2 of you and have 2 respectable starting armies that cost significantly less by doing that than if you bought them brand new, you know, in their individual boxes. I mean, 10 Primaris Intercessors are £35. The Dark Imperium box is £98. You get 10 Primaris Intercessors in that box. That's already a third of the value, more than a third of the value is taken up by just 10 models if you were to buy them in their own separate packaging. It's a ridiculously good deal, and there are older box sets still floating around. There's still stuff that you can grab, and again, split the contents that way, and split the bill that way as well. If it was someone who relishes a challenge, there's also the prospect of eBay. Now, I don't often bring eBay up to people as a way of getting into the hobby because it can be very hit or miss. There are obviously ways of stripping models. There are multiple copious numbers of like articles and instructions on how to do that, how to strip a model of paint so you can repaint it yourself. It can be very hit or miss. You know, you could find that you've bought a tactical squad off someone, you've cleaned them off, they've been stripped wonderfully, like new, you can paint them again, no problem. You can also find that you buy a tactical squad, you try and strip the models of paint, and it's been layered on so thick and in multiple layers that there's just no shifting it. If you are adventurous, if you're brave, and if you don't mind potentially chucking a few quid down the drain, it's definitely something to look at. The choice on eBay is always going to be worse than if you buy new. That's the one thing I'd say. If you're looking for Space Marine stuff, eBay's great. If you're looking for... I mean, I've tried to look for things like Dark Eldar stuff before. not so great. You know, the more popular the army is, the more secondhand stuff is available, obviously. But it does limit your choice in terms of what army to start if you did want to go about doing secondhand models. There really is also a huge number of places that you can get things like paint and brushes and so on and so forth. Just because you start in Warhammer 40,000 doesn't mean you need to be reliant on Games Workshop for literally every single thing you buy. You know, you can get paintbrushes off Amazon for a damn sight cheaper. They might not be the best quality, but if you're just starting out, you're not sure whether you really want to get into it or not, don't waste your money by buying like 5 brushes for 50 quid from somewhere. You can get the rough idea with cheaper brushes. And if you enjoy what you're doing, if you enjoy the painting aspect, if you want to make it something a bit more, then splash out later on. Same thing with paints. There are so many alternative paint makers to Games Workshop. The Citadel paints aren't bad, but they're also relatively expensive. There are plenty of other brands, and there are plenty of resources out there in terms of colour matching. So if you wanted to make an Ultramarines army and you were like, well, I need Macragge blue or Ultramarine blue? I don't paint blue. You can easily find alternatives to those paints, to Citadel paints, from other ranges, and people will have done the work already. They will have sat down and gone, okay, what matches that? And that information is there for you to use. One thing I will say is that when it comes to things like painting tutorials, that is one area where Games Workshop do have you covered. The Warhammer TV channel is actually really damn good for painting tutorials. Some of it might make you think, oh god, I'm never going to be that good because Duncan is our Lord and Saviour, but you will get some really good tips, some really good advice there. So if the modelling and painting aspect of things is a little bit intimidating, again, there are plenty of resources at this point that will allow you to overcome that. That's one of the reasons that I think this is the best time to start 40k. This specific moment where we are in 8th, I think it's the best time to start because it's a contribution of loads of different factors. You've got a huge variety in terms of armies to choose from. You've got loads of units to choose from. You've got a huge selection of paints, not just in terms of colours, but also where you want to buy them and what company makes them. There are years worth of different tutorials and discussions and videos talking about how to get the most out of your army, how to model your army, how to paint your army. You're kind of sitting on like just years and years of other people's experiences, which they have very kindly written down and recorded, that will allow you at this point to go, oh, well, if I buy that start collecting box, then I know that in the next couple of months I can expand that with this model, and that unit. I also know how to put them together down to the letter. I know how to remove mold lines. I know how to paint them in this specific colour because someone has done a tutorial for that. And I know what tactics to use to make it so that I potentially win with that force. There is no better time. There is genuinely no better time to start playing the game than now. You have all of that information right at your fingertips whenever you want it. And despite the fact that Warhammer 40,000 is an expensive hobby, it also now is kind of relatively cheap to get into. When it comes to hobbies that require money, it's no longer a case of you've got to drop, 150 quid to get into Warhammer 40k. You don't need to do that. You can drop like a third of that and you could still be pretty set. So if you're thinking about it, if you've been wondering whether to do it, whether to take the plunge, go for it. Now is the time to start, genuinely. I hope you found that interesting. If anyone has any quality tips in terms of what to do if you're just starting out, let us know in the comments below. Very much appreciate that. And in the meantime, feel free to click any of the things on the screen, videos, Patreon, subscribe, all of that shit. Click it if you like, don't click if you don't want to. And I'll see you for the next one. Toodaloo.